Today I want to take a little bit of time and do two things. I want to give you an overview of C.S. Lewis, the great, famous, important Oxford Don who moved from atheism to faith and became the 20th century's premier Christian apologist. So apologist is that branch of theology that is involved in defending the faith. Plato's apology, the Greek word apologia, Plato's apology was the defense of Socrates in his trial against the charges that he was corrupting the youth. So apologetics, based on that Greek word apologia, is the defense of the Christian faith. C.S. Lewis moved from atheism to Christianity and then became the premier defender of the faith, arguing for the validity of Christianity. So I want to talk with you about C.S. Lewis. That's mostly what I want to do. I also want to see if I can persuade you to take a class on C.S. Lewis that I'm going to be teaching through Lake Light starting later this month. So it's been a while since I've recorded a podcast. When I grow up, I will do a better job of estimating what I can get done. I'm only 63. I've only been doing this job for about 40 years. So I am to be forgiven for not having a good understanding of how many interruptions happen when you're a pastor and what my bandwidth is and all of that. But anyway, I'm embarrassed that it's been a while. It is what it is. And I'll start by saying, I'm pretty sure you know something about C.S. Lewis. It's really hard not to. As a matter of fact, between Christmas and New Year's, I was doing a lot of my prep work for this class, and I was discovering how much has been done on C.S. Lewis recently, and then just discovering how much is just popping up in popular culture. So there's a new movie just out, limited release, but Anthony Hopkins is playing Freud in a movie that features it didn't happen, but a supposed interaction between C.S. Lewis and Sigmund Freud. So we've got movies that are coming out. This is in addition, of course, to the Chronicles of Narnia movies, which were not about C.S. Lewis's life. They were about books that C.S. Lewis had written. Max McLean and a number of others have been rolling out one-act plays, or just, I guess, very limited live productions of C.S. Lewis around Screwtape Letters, The Great Divorce, The Most Reluctant Convert. That got turned into a movie. So there's just a lot out there. So my guess is that you know something about C.S. Lewis, and my hope is that you know something about Lake Light, which is the new venture that we started this past year. It's part institute, part think tank, part sort of publishing division, and all of which are being led by Dr. Ben Dockery. So the class that I'm going to be teaching is going to be taught through Lake Light. It's going to be taught in person at Christ Church. It's also going to be available online. You can simply, sign up and enroll and sort of sit back and audit the class. That is something that could be done. My goal is to push people into engaging with Lewis, reading Lewis, and growing because of Lewis. And one of the reasons that we started Lake Light, not the only reason, but one of the reasons that we started Lake Light is that over the 40 years that I have been involved as a pastor, the bar keeps getting lower for what constitutes sort of Christian understanding and where people sort of show up. I mean, we've moved out of moving away from a Judeo-Christian culture. I don't want to suggest that the culture 40 years ago was Christian. No, that's not what I'm saying. But there was more understanding of the biblical story. There was more literacy on some of these things. And there was more willingness to engage. We've become more of an entertainment culture. People read a lot less. They are prepared to do less rigorous study and engagement with books. And that has, that's a thing. That's a deleterious thing in terms of our growth. And so as a preacher, there's been this push to have messages be shorter, and you have to explain more things. And okay, fine, I get that. I mean, increasingly, I have to view my job as being a missionary to the West or to North America. Okay. And so you have to think more missiologically. Okay. And so you got to adapt, and you got to figure out how to find those connection points. But uh, it means that we've lost some of the things where we say, okay, you've got to reach for this. You have to come into this class with this much understanding, or you've got to be willing to push. So normally if somebody says, I don't understand this, or this book is too hard, or whatever, we've tried to dumb it down. And this Lake Light, we've sort of said, yeah, we're going to sort of say that's the bar. You have to engage. You have to work a little bit harder. You've got to try a little bit, more diligently. And so my instinct as a pastor is always to figure out how to take the cookies and put them on the bottom shelf. And in the Lake Light, all the different things that Lake Light is doing, lectures and fellows and classes and tours and all that stuff, we're trying to say, okay, we're going to ask you to step up and engage. So with all that as prelude, let me give you 6 reasons why you should be studying C.S. Lewis. Number 1, his life was fascinating. There's a reason why people are making movies about C.S. Lewis's life. Again, this is not just about C.S. Lewis's works, Screwtape Letters, Hideous Strength, Chronicles of Narnia, all the stuff that he wrote, all the fiction that he wrote. There's a lot of interest in that. I'm saying he led a very fascinating life. So I'm going to spend 2 lectures in the class focusing on his life. The first one, sort of starting, he lives to be, I think, in his mid-60s when he passes away on November 22nd, 1963. So basically, we're coming up on, what is that, 80 years ago, 60 years ago, I guess, 60 years ago. I'm going to give 2 lectures on his life, and one will go up until the age of 30, which is really, just through his conversion. So he's an atheist until he's in his mid-20s. He becomes a theist for a while, and then eventually he becomes a Christian. But and then the second lecture, by the way, is going to be the second lecture is going to be on the second half of his life. Now, I'm going to confuse you, and I apologize, but we actually are starting this class, soft start, with a lecture by Jerry Root, a distinguished C.S. Lewis scholar out of Wheaton. And he is going to give the first lecture, and that is going to be on Monday, January 22nd. And that's going to be on C.S. Lewis and his imagination. And that's sort of independent of the class. The class will start the next Tuesday. So we move from Monday, when Root is giving his lecture that's open to anybody, to the class that starts on Tuesday, January 30th. So the first lecture that I'm going to give is going to be on the first half of C.S. Lewis's life. Second lecture is going to be on the second half of C.S. Lewis's life. And I'm going to do one on Mere Christianity. I'm going to do one on the abolition of man. We're going to do just a sort of an all things Q&A on C.S. Lewis with a focus on the abolition of man and hideous strength. But I am going to spend 2 lectures walking you through his life because there is so much interesting stuff that happened. We're going to start with his childhood, which was fun and interesting and sort of carefree until he's about 10. He and his brother, Warney, who's Warney's sort of a lifelong bachelor. Lewis is a bachelor basically until he's 60. They are together, they live together, they do a lot together, and they have a great friendship, and they have a friendship early on. Warney's a few years older than Lewis is. Then he goes by Jack. His name is officially Clive Staples Lewis. When he was a little boy and he figured that out, he says, yeah, I'm not going by Clive, I'm going by Jack. And it stuck. Jack is a few years younger than his brother Warnie, and they have a great ideal childhood. There's a castle nearby. He's already creating magical worlds with talking animals and other things. He writes this stuff when he's a kid. You can get it in print even today. But when he's around 9 or 10, his mom passes away, and his life takes a radical turn in the wrong direction. His dad, who is doesn't appear to have been a great dad before the death of his wife, really becomes quite dysfunctional. So Lewis gets sent off to a boarding school, which he hates. His brother's already gone to boarding school, and his brother's doing okay. His brother's more athletic. Jack Lewis, C.S. Lewis, is not athletic. He gets picked on, and he says the school is horrible, and he writes to his dad, "Get me out of here. These people are crazy." Turns out the headmaster of the school was likely very disturbed. He gets arrested one day. They come and arrest him and put him in prison, and he's going to die. He dies shortly thereafter in prison. And there's reasons to think it was just a horrible sadistic boarding school. So Lewis goes there for a while. When this guy dies, he gets a break, and his dad pulls him out of boarding schools and has him tutored by this guy, Kirkpatrick, who had tutored the dad. So Lewis's dad had been tutored by this guy, Kirkpatrick, and then Warnie had been tutored by him for a while, and then Jack Lewis, C.S. Lewis, will be tutored by him. They call him the Great Knock, and he's a character, brilliant and very rigorous, and an atheist, and very much a rationalist. Lewis has already become an atheist at this point. His mom dies. He's at this boarding school. His prayers are not being answered to his satisfaction. He doesn't believe God exists. Kirkpatrick, the Great Knock, will drive out any vestiges of faith that Lewis has, and will inculcate in him this rigorously rational mind. And he'll push Lewis really hard. Lewis likely, before he goes to Oxford, will likely have studied everything that he was going to study at Oxford. The Great Knock was quite amazing. However, before Oxford, so Lewis has now got this tutor through high school. Before Oxford, he's provisionally accepted into Oxford. He has very high test scores in everything except math. Math would have actually kept him out of Oxford, because you have to pass a basic competency in math, and he couldn't do it. He's going to be able to get into Oxford after the war because there's an exemption for veterans. So he enlists. So this is the First World War. He enlists. He doesn't have to. He's Irish. And so he doesn't have to enlist, but he believes that is his duty. So he signs up and goes to Oxford ever so briefly, ends up pivoting, going into the army. He's in the infantry, and that's a very profound experience for him. So he will he will lose a lot of friends in the war. And he also will be shot. Friendly fire. He is shot and is left for dead on the battlefield. A long convalescence, and then he will get out. And at that point, he goes to school at Oxford. So one of the things that happens is he and a friend of his, who he meets in the army, Paddy Moore, they become fast friends. They're both worried about their parents. They have Paddy Moore's dad had died, so he's got a mom, a single mom, widow, and C.S. Lewis's mom had died. He's got a single father, and both of the young men, Paddy and Jack Lewis, recognize that their parents have got issues. And so they say to each other, they make a pledge. If you die, so Lewis says to Paddy Moore, if you die, I will take care of your mom. If I die, you got to take care of my dad. And Paddy Moore dies in the war. And Lewis will spend Lewis will fulfill that promise for the next 30 years. He will take care of Mrs. Moore, uh, will have her move in, and he will care for her. She's a difficult woman, and she also has a younger daughter. So Lewis will take care of Mrs. Moore and the Moore daughter for 30 years. Now, it's a complicated relationship, and C.S. Lewis scholars are divided as to whether or not the relationship between Lewis and Patty Moore is sexual. I initially thought no. Then Alistair McGrath persuaded me yes. Jerry Root is now trying to persuade me no. I don't know. It's obvious when you are digging into Lewis's life. It's obvious he's a very troubled young man. Like, he's troubled by the death of his mom. That's a big scar. His father is very dysfunctional. When Lewis is recovering from being shot, and he's in this hospital. It's like 30 miles away from London. He's in this field hospital for months. And he writes to his dad repeatedly, Dad, I'm in this hospital. Please come see me. Please come visit me. His dad never visits, which just, and you got these letters by Lewis begging his dad, nobody believes that I have a father. Nobody believes. The nurses are all asking, when's somebody going to come visit you? And Warney's fighting on other fronts. And so just a very dysfunctional father. Then the war and PTSD, and so you can go, yeah, I mean, I could see that he's got, mother issues, he's got PTSD, there's a lot of things that are pretty dark. Now, he's not a Christian at this point, so nobody thinks that after he becomes a Christian, he's sleeping with Mrs. Moore, but there are people that say that he was. So that sort of is an interesting little side note, the whole World War I thing. When he gets out of the war, when he gets out of the army, he goes to Oxford, and he will do something very few people do at Oxford, and that is he'll get a triple first, which is sort of like getting graduating summa cum laude in 3 different fields. And one is philosophy, and then there's a couple in literature. And so he's reading the classics in Greek, and he's brilliant. Hard to get into Oxford. If you get into Oxford, it's hard to get a first. It's really hard to get 2 firsts. I mean, almost nobody gets 3 firsts at Oxford, but Lewis does. When he gets out of Oxford, he starts to teach at Oxford. So initially, he's teaching in philosophy. He's then going to start teaching in literature. And he is teaching there. That's when he's going to meet a number of people, including Tolkien. And Tolkien will be one of the people who will be instrumental in seeing Lewis come to faith. So Lewis is an atheist. He's a pretty evangelistic atheist. He doesn't want people to believe, and he's shocked when he's discovering that all these people that he really likes are Christ followers. And Tolkien in particular will persuade Lewis. It takes years, and they get in these reading groups initially. Lewis has to learn Icelandic to get into this book club that Tolkien is, where they're reading these great northern stories. And so he will study Icelandic so that he can get into this book club. And eventually he will come to faith through Lewis and others. Then he will be a teacher at Oxford for a number of years. And he'll start to write. He'll write the book Pilgrim's Regress, which is sort of a knockoff of Pilgrim's Progress, Paul Bunyan. Or John Bunyan. Okay, not sure. I'll have to get my Bunyan straight. But he will he'll be teaching. So his book, Pilgrim's Regress, really gets him sideways because it sort of attacks higher education and the other faculty and really gets him sideways with the faculty. So Lewis will, even as he's becoming a world-class scholar and noted for all the stuff that he's doing, he will remain essentially a tutor at Oxford until he's like in his mid-50s. So he's not a professor at Oxford until very late. Cambridge will hire him eventually to be a professor at Cambridge. Then Oxford wants to keep him, so he'll have a joint appointment between Cambridge and Oxford, medieval studies and literature and other things. But he will be the guy that's basically grading papers. More than a graduate assistant, it's a different setup there at Oxford and Cambridge, but that's going to be what he's going to do then for some period. He's going to be writing books. His fame will rise when he does the BBC recordings during World War II. The BBC is looking for somebody to speak to the country, to give some sort of Christian message to the country. They don't really want a pastor. They don't want to elevate a pastor over other pastors in the Church of England. And Lewis is overheard giving a chapel message called Learning in Time of War. And the BBC guy who hears this says, that's the person we need. And so Lewis will give these addresses during World War II to the country. And he will become, at that point, some would say, the second most commonly heard voice, most recognizable voice in England, behind Winston Churchill. And those addresses that he gives during the war, according to the BBC, become what we know of as mere Christianity. So he'll become famous, and he'll write screw tape letters. He'll be on the cover of, Time magazine. I mean, he becomes a big guy. And then he's going to have this whole episode with Joy Davidman. So there's a woman. So Joy Davidman, who is an American. She's Jewish American. She'd been an atheist and a communist, and she'd been chased out of the U.S. by Joseph McCarthy. She and her husband were making sort of communist propaganda films in the U.S. And McCarthy, for all the crazy stuff McCarthy does, he actually does recognize some. They flee. So Davidman and her first husband, they flee. He's abusive. They go through a divorce. She reaches out to Lewis, as many people do, because of his books, and they will eventually meet. And she's got a couple kids, and she's going to come down with cancer. And the timing on this gets a little complicated, but she'll come down with cancer. He's visiting her. She's sick. She needs help, and he feels some responsibility. She's got this very difficult life. And at some point, the Brits figure out who she is and that she's this communist, and they're going to kick her out of the country because she's an American. And Lewis marries her. So this is Shadowlands, if you've seen that movie. Again, Anthony Hopkins plays Lewis in this. And it's actually, Sherry and I just watched it a couple weeks ago, rewatched it. And it's a good movie, but it gets a few things wrong. Davidman is a really challenging person to be around. She's sort of a very outspoken person, and she has not one. There's only one kid in the movie. She actually has two. So there's David and Douglas, and you hear a lot about Douglas because Douglas is going to be the guy, the kid who's going to inherit all the royalty rights to all of C.S. Lewis's books. And he's in his 90s if he's still alive. It came out about a couple of years ago that the other son that you heard nothing about for the last 60 years just passed away, that he had been institutionalized, he'd been mentally ill, very challenging. At one point, I think he tried to kill his brother when Lewis was guarding them, or tried to kill Lewis. Challenging situation. By the way, Lewis at this point is living with Warney, who had been in both wars. He had sort of professional military background. Warney's an alcoholic, probably some PTSD. So Mrs. Moore, you got Mrs. Moore there. She's very hard to get along with. You got Warnie, who's got a drinking issue. You've got now Joy Davidman will come in. Lewis will marry her. It's sort of expected she's going to die of cancer. She gets better. And so now they're married, and they're going to, they're technically married. They're married in the eyes of the state. This marriage had not been consummated, but now they're going to actually fall in love, and Lewis is going to marry her again, have a bishop or have a pastor or priest from the Church of England marry them, Christian marriage, and then you now have got Warnie, Mrs. Moore, Joy Davidman, the kids. It's interesting. Lewis's life is interesting. So the first reason to study Lewis is just because he's got a fascinating life. Second reason to study Lewis is because he is an important and influential world-class scholar. He was a master of the Western canon, right? Homer and Shakespeare and Plato and all of these, Milton, Chaucer, Dickens. He's got his book on 16th century English literature is still like one of the revered classics. He wrote it 60 years ago. It's still in print. Or he wrote it 80 years ago. It's still in print. And he's brilliant because he also has got this mastery of history and philosophy. He just understands the West in a way that very few people ever could. So his work as an apologist in the 20th century will really be without peer because he is so brilliant. And it's not just that he's brilliant in these areas of philosophy and literature and history. And he's brilliant in terms of having this brilliant imagination. So it's not just that he's got this mastery of all this material. He's this brilliant person in terms of imagining things. And then it turns out that he's got this third component, that he's able to communicate in a way that is just, people go, oh, I get it. I mean, it's hard when we marvel when you get a John Lennon and a Paul McCartney in the same band, Michael Jordan and a Scottie Pippen on the same team. I don't know, Jobs and Wozniak. I mean, pick your two where you go, wow, imagine you got those two people together. Lewis is sort of both of those people and really a third person in one person. And so you just have got this really remarkable individual. Third reason you should study Lewis is because he's one of the best teachers you are going to ever come across. Because he's not only smart, but because he's got this great imagination, he is able to communicate things in a way that people understand. So he makes it understandable and he makes it memorable. A fourth reason you should study Lewis is because he was right. So the first reason you study Lewis is because he's a fascinating person. The second reason is because he's an important intellect. Third is because he's a brilliant teacher. Fourth, he was right. Lewis saw things and saw where we were headed more clearly than just about anyone else. So he lays out a script for what's going to happen in the last part of the 20th century and into the 21st century. And he lays this out first in The Abolition of Man and also then in That Hideous Strength. The Abolition of Man was a series of lectures that he gave in 1943, the Riddle Lectures, which were on faith and society. This was at the University of Durham. And these were 3 lectures given to professional philosophers. It's not the most accessible stuff Lewis did. So he did, and he knew that. So he writes That Hideous Strength, which is a fictional account of what he says is going to happen in these 3 lectures. And I'm gonna talk about those 3 lectures. Again, that's going to be my 4th lecture, the 5th class. As I have come back to studying C.S. Lewis, so I taught a class on C.S. Lewis 25 years ago. And so I haven't really been current on Lewis scholarship for the last 25 years. So I've had to jump back into this stuff and be reading and getting ready. And the big surprise for me was to say, oh, look at how much more has been done on Lewis. And in particular, by people who are fascinated with the abolition of man and that hideous strength, because he talks in the abolition of man, he opens by talking about these, he's got these two fictional characters that come out of history, part of Gaius and Titius, and they're having a conversation about whether or not this waterfall should be should be described as being sublime or should be described as being pretty. And Lewis sort of, launches from there into the fact that if you call it pretty, the world is going to end. And when I read this, the first time, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever, I'm like, Lewis, you stuffy, self-important, dry, clueless intellectual. Like, who cares if you call it pretty or call it sublime? I now go back and read this again and go, oh, he's talking about whether or not there's such a thing as objective beauty. Is there objective reality? Is there objective truth? Are there universal standards? Is there a moral law? Or are we free to just to respond to things based on our own feelings about them? And so he moves from there, but he's assuming you have, in the abolition of man, he's assuming you have an understanding of the humanities and the classics and philosophy. And it's not the most accessible stuff. But when you understand what he's saying, and then you look at today, you go, oh, yeah, okay, he got it right. And a lot of people, not just Christians, mostly Christians, but not just Christians, some secular people are saying, wow, alongside, Brave New World, alongside, alongside some of the other books that were written in that sort of genre, talking about where we were headed, the abolition of man and that hideous strength are better. They're more accurate about what was happening and why. The fifth reason you should read C.S. Lewis is because it will add to your personal density. So in Alan Jacobs' book, Breaking Bread with the Dead, he talks about the fact that, which Lewis also says, is that you've got to read old books in order to have the kind of understanding and personal gravitas that gives you weight to stand against the whims of modern culture. So the volume and velocity of current culture is quite strong, and it just blows people with it. It's the stream that just carries you downstream. And you need to have personal density in order to say, this is just today's thinking, and it's going to be different tomorrow, and I'm not going to get swept up with everybody else. So Lewis, I just think as a Christian, as a philosopher, as a social critic, as everything, he's just able to say, look, these are the things. He's such a thoroughly converted guy. These are the things that ultimately matter. And these other things are sideways energy and noise. So the final reason you should study C.S. Lewis is because Lewis can be for you a mentor if you let him. It will be a literary mentor. Obviously, you're not going to meet with him. He's been dead for 60 years. But he could be a mentor. And so I was sort of came across this idea of having a literary mentor 25 years ago. Earl Palmer, who was the senior pastor at University Presbyterian Church, and who taught a class on C.S. Lewis that I took and take a lot of ideas from. He was a sort of a Lewis scholar. Palmer passed away just a little while ago, but he was big on having literary mentors, and his literary mentors were Lewis and Tolkien and Barth and Mark Twain. I think he had one or two others, but he said, look, you find these authors who connect with you, and you read everything they wrote, and you let them talk to you, and you learn how they think so that you can then think like they think. So he was a big guy advocating Lewis, in part because of Lewis. I mean, he writes so much and he writes so well and he's so thoughtful. And he's also in print. So one of the good things about Lewis is, I mean, since Lewis died, he's written like 10 more books because people find all these letters. He and Warney would spend a couple hours every day answering Lewis's mail. He got all this correspondence from people who were drawn by his books, and they would write him letters. And he felt the obligation to respond to every letter. And so he would sit down, and Warney would, they called it drive. Warney would drive the typewriter, and Lewis would dictate these responses to all of these letters. And so there's thousands and thousands and thousands of letters, and they keep coming in, and they keep getting collected, and then somebody stumbles across some article that Lewis wrote, and these articles get collected. So he keeps writing books, and all this stuff, including the boxing series that he wrote when he was a kid. All this stuff is in print. You can get Lewis and become a Lewis disciple. So, okay, I'm excited about Lewis. I'm excited about this class. Let me end by saying that again, this class is going to be offered through Lake Light. It costs $49. It's got a soft start with Jerry Root, the C.S. Lewis scholar from Wheaton, and that is on the 22nd of January, Monday, January 22nd at the Lake Forest campus at Christ Church and online. And then the class that I teach will start the next week, start on Tuesday, January 30th. And I'm going to give, there's going to be 5 lectures over 6 weeks. So on the 30th, I'm going to do the first part of his life. On February 6th, I'm going to give a lecture on the second part of his life. February 13th, it's Mere Christianity. February 20th, it's the Abolition of Man. We may or may not meet on the 27th. I am out. I might tape something. We're trying to get the film, this new C.S. Lewis, Anthony Hopkins, Lewis and Freud movie, to see if we can do a showing of that. Don't know what's going to happen yet. And then on March 5th will be the last, and that's going to be an interview I'm doing with Jerry Root, Q&A on all things Lewis, with some focus on that hideous strength. So, 3 things to know about the class. It will be live at Lake Forest. It will be online. Secondly, I am going to try and make it fun. I'm going to start with reading some of his correspondence. So if you're reading his letters, you get a little bit of a feel. If you're reading the letters that he's writing to people or reading his journal. So I would do a little bit of that. That was a Earl Palmer thing. He would start his class reading, just a couple minutes of that. And there's a lecture, and then I end with, again, an Earl Palmer thing. Reading sort of a C.S. Lewis bedtime story out of the Chronicles of Narnia and making sure that you understand it. So you can go online to register for this class. And, hey, full disclosure of my conflicts of interest, right? So I'm teaching the class. I'm not paid to teach the class. That's not my conflict of interest. But you pay $49. I chair the Lake Light board. So this is a Lake Light class. So yes, I'm encouraging you to do something that we're trying to grow Lake Light. But I believe that's a good thing. And I think you could do a lot worse than deciding that your January, February, and March is going to be spent reading C.S. Lewis and attending classes and discussions on him. I think he can help you grow in your thinking and in your love for God. So, hope you do it. Have a good day.